welcome back to my channel. I'm Jhonna, and this is Jhonna Unfiltered. We're continuing the series on MBTI types as narcissistic parents, and today we're looking at INTJ, which is also known as the architect type. Before anything else, the usual disclaimer that I mean every time I say it. I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a therapist, and nothing in this video is a clinical diagnosis of any person. This is a learning exploration based on research, observation, and patterns that show up when we look at personality types and narcissistic behavior together. I'm sharing this because I think it can help people make sense of experiences that were confusing, and possibly because some parents watching might recognize something in themselves they hadn't named before. Both of those are valid reasons to engage with this topic seriously. The most important thing I want to say before we go any further is this. Being an INTJ does not make someone a narcissist. Most INTJs are not narcissistic parents. This series is about understanding what narcissism looks like when it's filtered through a particular personality type, because the type shapes the style, not the problem itself. Now, let me explain what INTJ actually is for anyone who needs that context. INTJ stands for introverted, intuitive, thinking, and judging. People of this type are often described as strategic thinkers. They plan far ahead. They're very independent and value their autonomy. They're logical and direct, sometimes to the point of seeming cold. And they have extremely high standards, both for themselves and for the people they're close to. In a healthy form, an INTJ parent can be one of the most dedicated, thoughtful, and effective parents out there. They prepare their kids for real challenges. They teach critical thinking. They're protective in a structured, long-term way. They don't just react to problems, they anticipate and prevent them. But when narcissistic patterns layer onto those same traits, something shifts. And what makes the INTJ version of narcissistic parenting so difficult to recognize and process is that it rarely looks like what most people think of as abuse. There's no shouting, no chaos, no obvious cruelty. Everything looks calm, controlled, and reasonable from the outside. And that's exactly what makes it so hard to recover from. Let me explain the core pattern. The INTJ narcissistic parent operates from a core belief that their own logic is superior. Not just usually correct, but always correct. And because they've often built their identity around their intelligence and strategic thinking, any challenge to that belief feels like a personal threat. So, in a family setting, this translates into a home where the parent's view of reality is the only one that's treated as legitimate. When the child is upset, the parent doesn't comfort them. They analyze the situation and explain why the child's emotional response is incorrect or unnecessary. This might sound like your feelings don't match the facts, or you're overreacting based on incomplete information. And the parent genuinely believes they're being helpful. They think they're teaching the child to think more clearly. What the child actually experiences is that their inner world is constantly being dismissed and corrected. They learn very early that emotions are something to be managed rather than felt, and that expressing vulnerability isn't safe in this house. This creates a specific kind of loneliness that's hard to describe. The child doesn't feel hated. They might even know, on some level, that the parent cares. But they feel fundamentally unseen, because the version of them that the parent engages with is the performing, achieving, thinking version. The messy, uncertain, emotional version doesn't get much space. Let me talk about the mother version and the father version separately, because they tend to express this differently. The INTJ narcissistic mother tends to be extremely organized and strategic about the child's life. She has plans. She knows what school the child should attend, what activities they should do, what kind of person they should become. And she's involved, which can look like care from the outside. But her involvement is really about managing a project. The child is meant to fit into a structure that the mother has already designed. And when the child expresses a preference that doesn't fit that structure, she doesn't just disagree. She treats it like a malfunction that needs to be corrected. She's also often very image conscious. The family is supposed to look capable, intelligent, and successful. So the child carries the additional burden of representing the family correctly in public. Struggling, failing visibly, or simply being average in any area can feel like a betrayal of the family's image. And the child learns to hide their struggles rather than seek support for them. When the child is emotionally vulnerable, this type of mother typically responds with solutions rather than comfort. She'll tell you what to do about the problem. She won't just sit with you in the difficulty. And over time, the child stops bringing their real struggles to her because the response never makes them feel better. It just makes them feel like they're doing vulnerability wrong. The INTJ narcissistic father tends to operate at more of a distance. He's often physically present, but emotionally elsewhere. His engagement with the child is usually tied to specific occasions when there's something to evaluate, something to correct, or something to guide. He has a vision for what the child should be, and he pursues that vision with the same determination he applies to everything else. The child's own preferences are not really factored in, not out of cruelty, but because the father has already decided what the optimal outcome looks like, and deviation from that plan feels illogical to him. His form of discipline is often the silent kind. He doesn't usually yell or become aggressive. Instead, when he's disappointed, he withdraws. He becomes emotionally unavailable. He might go days without engaging, not as a calculated punishment, but because he's genuinely disengaged. And for a child, that silence is devastating because it communicates that they've failed in a way that's made them uninteresting or unworthy of attention. He's also often a skilled debater. When the child tries to push back or express a different view, he can dismantle their argument so efficiently and so calmly that the child doesn't actually feel heard or convinced. They just feel outmatched. And eventually, many children in this dynamic stop expressing opinions altogether, not because they've been forbidden to, but because it never leads anywhere and it costs them emotionally every time they try. Let me look at how financial situation changes the dynamic. A wealthy INTJ narcissistic parent has genuine resources to offer, and those resources often become part of the control structure. The child has access to excellent education, opportunities, stability. Those things are real, but they come with invisible contracts. The resources are provided in exchange for performance, for alignment with the parent's vision, for maintaining the family's image of success. And if the child chooses a path the parent didn't plan for, those resources can become leverage. The message becomes, "I've invested in you, and you owe me a return." The child in this dynamic often feels they can't complain because they've been given so much. That silence is part of the problem. Having material advantages doesn't mean emotional needs were met, and the two things aren't interchangeable, even if the parent genuinely believes they are. A financially struggling INTJ narcissistic parent operates differently. Without material resources, the leverage tends to be sacrifice itself. The parent communicates, often without saying it directly, that their struggle is the child's responsibility, that the child's success is owed to them as repayment for everything they've given up. This creates a child who works extremely hard, often from a place of guilt rather than genuine motivation, and who can't fully enjoy their own achievements because they feel they belong to someone else. The substance-dependent version of this parent type is particularly disorienting because the contrast is so stark. An INTJ in their normal state is controlled, precise, and deliberate. They don't show much, but they're consistent. When alcohol or substances are involved, that precision collapses. The parent who is normally composed becomes harsh and unfiltered. And because they know the child's exact vulnerabilities, because they've been observing and analyzing for years, the things they say when they're not controlled can be precisely calibrated to hurt in ways that land very deep. The child lives in a state of constant alertness, monitoring the parent's state, adjusting their own behavior to minimize the risk of triggering the wrong version of the parent they're going home to. Now let me talk about what the children of this type of parent tend to carry. They often become highly capable, high-achieving adults. They learned that competence was the language of love in their home, so they became very good at being competent. They're often skilled at thinking things through, at presenting well, at being independent and self-sufficient. And those are genuinely valuable traits. But they also often struggle with a specific kind of perfectionism that runs deeper than just wanting to do things well. It's a fear of what failure means about them, about their worth, about whether they'll be valued. They tend to have difficulty with emotional intimacy because vulnerability wasn't safe growing up and the habit of hiding it is deeply ingrained. They often over-explain themselves, feeling that they need a logical justification for every feeling before they're allowed to have it. And they may struggle to receive genuine care without immediately wondering what's expected of them in return. One of the hardest parts of recovering from this kind of parenting is that it doesn't always look like what people think of when they think about a difficult childhood. There was no visible chaos. There might have been real effort, real sacrifice, real moments of genuine care. And holding those truths alongside the truth of the harm is genuinely complicated. You're allowed to do that. You're allowed to acknowledge what was real and good while also acknowledging what hurt you. Those two things can both be true at the same time. Before I close, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever had a parent or someone significant in your life who expressed care mainly through correction and high expectations rather than warmth and comfort? And how did that shape the way you handle your own emotions as an adult? Drop it in the comments if you're comfortable sharing. I read them, and I find that real experiences always add something to these conversations that I can't capture from research alone. Thanks for watching. If this video resonated with you, please consider hitting the subscribe button. I want to be upfront and share that I use this text-to-speech voice to tell my stories because, as a full-time ESL teacher, I have to be very careful with my vocal cords. Managing vocal nodules means I have to save my voice for my students, but I didn't want that to stop me from sharing these unfiltered thoughts with you. I'm Jhonna, and I'm currently working toward my goal of 1,000 subscribers so I can finally monetize this channel and turn this passion into a sustainable part of my future. This is my diary of solo living here in the Philippines, and your support, whether through a comment or a sub, helps me keep this channel growing. If you would like to help out even more, you can check out the buy a treat for my pets link in the description. My dogs definitely appreciate the love. Make sure you are subscribed so you do not miss the next update. Thank you for being such an important part of this journey. I'm Jhonna, and I will see you in the next one.